My mom taught me to sell at a spaza shop. She ran a hair salon. I pretty much learned entrepreneurship from my mom's.
Umntu ngumntu ngabantu. That on your own, you can't really do it. You need the support of those around you.
You will have a network of people, a network of communities, and a society that will make sure that you count.
Good day and welcome to another session of SAITA Straight Talk. As you know, SAITA is the South African Informal Traders Alliance, and we endeavor to be the voice of the marginalized and informal trading sector in South Africa. As usual, we in the SAITA Straight Talk about issues that are pertinent to the informal sector. And today, it is my pleasure to welcome as my guest today, the entrepreneur, the marketer, the author, GG Alcock. GG, thank you for your time and welcome to SAITA Straight Talk.
Great, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, GG, tell us a little bit more about yourself, because you've got a very, very interesting background, and I know you speak to a lot of people, but because this is SAITA, this platform speaks directly into the informal trading sector. So it's probably a slightly different audience to what you normally address. So tell us who you are and what you're about.
Sure. So, in fact, I'm much happier speaking to this audience than the corporate audience I often talk to. So thank you for having me. I'm very passionate about this space. So, I grew up in a mud hut in a Zulu village in a place called Msinga in KwaZulu-Natal. Msinga is a very rural district. Was always years ago when I was growing up there, was the poorest district in South Africa. Today, it's officially the poorest district in South Africa, so not a lot has changed. My parents were community workers and political activists, and they believed the only way to really make a difference was to live and be part of the communities they lived in. So they had nothing. We grew up like Zulu kids in this mud hut. We washed in the Tugela River. We grew up herding goats and stick fighting with the local Zulu kids. And in many ways, that kind of prepared me for a life outside of that. I went on and became a political activist in the mid-80s and early 90s. And then I went into business. Long story short, I basically started one of the first marketing businesses that focused on the township economies, or the mass market, as it were, at a time where no one really believed that there was lots of economic activity and opportunities in that township space. And so I started this business called Mina Nawe Marketing. Mina Nawe means you and I in Zulu, and we specialized in targeting the sector, they call it township sector. And what it meant, of course, was that most people said, why should we spend money to market to that sector? They don't have any money. They're not doing anything. So we invested a lot of our time in understanding the people in those spaces, the businesses in those spaces, which were, as you would know, primarily informal businesses. I mean, I'm talking now 1990, 4, 5, 6, around about that period. There was primarily spaza shops and hawkers and so on, fast food outlets and so on. So that's where I started, and out of that, we were very successful in convincing people to look at that space, and out of it, I wrote. I've written 3 books. One's called Third World Child, White Born Zulu Bred, about growing up in a Zulu environment and the move to a city. But then my business books were Gasinomics and Gasinomic Revolution. And they are basically business books about the informal sector. And Gasinomics was kind of the first time, I think there was more than like academic research, a more kind of, I guess, popular business book that spoke to the informal sector. I called it Gasinomics because I generally don't like the term informal economy, because it implies all sorts of things which are incorrect. I mean, it implies that they're unsophisticated, they're unstructured, they're disorganized, they have low turnover, low income. All of these things which as you would agree, are not true. And so I wanted to create this concept of a dynamic, powerful economy, and that was hence Gasinomics, from the term for the township, Gasi. And it was really just to try and change that mindset around that. And have been very, very, they've all been bestsellers and kind of, I think, in many ways brought informal economies and the people who trade in those spaces much more into the spotlight, as it were, as serious business people, not just not in the term informal.
Gigi, would you agree with me that the informal trading sector has up till now actually expanded way out of the Kasi? That it has actually now moved into the suburbs. I mean, we all know government released the unemployment stats not too long ago. And that means that more and more payslip people are now at home also having to take on the hustle that was predominant only in the Kasi area. What would you say to that?
Look, so the first thing I say to people is, although, and it's a starting thing, I think in my book Gasinomics, was to say that that although I called it Gasinomics, the informal sector is in the townships, it's in the CBDs, it's in the inner cities, it's in the suburbs, and it's all around us in the rural areas as well. And that's the first thing, is that it's all around us. Second thing is important is that there's a tendency to think of the informal sector as spaza shops and hawkers or tabletop traders. And that's the first thing I say, is you cannot see it as that. It is a multi-sectorial sector. It ranges from, yes, of course, spazas and hawkers, but it includes things like the fast food sector, what I call gasikos. It includes the informal mechanics, those are panel beaters and gasi mechanics, and in the auto sector. It obviously includes the taxi industry. It includes things like the catering sector, who cater for funerals and unveiling ceremonies, weddings, and so on, is a big sector. It includes the hair sector, hair salons and barbers, whether they're in a street or in a back room or in a formal structure. The backroom rental sector, which I believe turns over about 20 billion rand a year, is a big part of the informal sector, which brings in huge incomes to township people. And in the rural areas, the goat sector, goat rearing primarily by women, small farmers. It even includes things like the dacha sector, which I wrote about as well, and many other sector, parts of that. So very much it's all around us. And I joke, I say the majority of the kind of, call it upper income or even the white part of our population, were introduced to the informal sector over lockdown because they needed to get their cigarettes. So suddenly they noticed it all around them, So yeah.
I know of a few who've become informal traders themselves in that time.
That as well, I mean, just the hair salons, people whose hair salons were closed were now doing like township home stylists, come to my house and we'll do your hair in my kitchen, So yeah.
I think that really epitomizes the drive behind an informal trader, isn't it? That despite hardships, there is no such thing as giving up. Yes, we see loiterers in sub-economic areas, but the majority of people are doing their thing. They just want to hustle to get by.
And by the way, sorry, I just as you were talking, another big sector is the school mamas who sell snacks and so on to the school kids with what they call ikeri and so on. I mean, that's a 2 billion rand sector and so on. So, but to your thing, so this is one of my things as well. The assumptions about the informal sector is that people in this space, if they could get a job, like a formal job, they would drop their business and they would move and take that job. And this is so untrue, and it's such a mistake. It does not give people the dignity and respect of the fact that many of these people have traded in the same spot, whether it's a piece of pavement or a container or whatever it might be. They have often traded there many, many years, 10, 11, 15, and they are proud of those businesses, and they have survived all sorts of economic impacts, and yet have continued to make a living and bring in a livelihood to their families. And I often tell the story of a woman in Tembisa who was selling snacks and stuff to the school kids, and she said, I was chatting to her, and she was sitting on this little bucket with a plank on top of it, selling her stuff on a sheet of cardboard. I said to her, how long have you been selling here? She said, 26 years. I was like, 26 years sitting on that upturned bucket and plank. She said, Ndodana, I put 2 children through university selling from this spot, and my husband was unemployed the whole time. So I said, I tested this thing that people would take a job. I said, if you could get a formal job, would you take it? And she laughed at me and she said, what would I do? Would I come to your house and wash your underwear? And she put it perfectly in perspective. She could have been a domestic worker, working for 8 hours a day, traveling on a taxi for an hour each way. And she'd probably earn 3,500 Rand a month. Which is the minimum wage for domestic workers. And yet here she works for 3 hours a day, first break, second break, and after school. She's been doing it for 26 years. Her quality of life, her trading, the kids love her. They all know her because she's always been there selling them snacks. And she doesn't want to take another job to go and work as something else. And this is one of the reasons I wrote about and speak about the sector, is that I think that if we recognized the contribution the informal sector makes to the economy and to employment and to livelihoods, the government, municipalities, corporate companies, and so on would give them far more respect, would engage with them better, and would and this sector being taken more seriously has really got it's the only sector that can actually transform our economy, because the formal sector has flatlined. There's no way we're going to create more jobs, not in a modern economy. So at the end of the day, we should be looking at these businesses. They have the real secret to transform our economy.
And that exactly is what SAITA is trying to do. Being an alliance means that all these smaller organizations, informal organizations, can tap into this voice, because we all know that, the numbers bring power. As you so rightfully said, that there's no real recognition given for the role that the informal sector plays in the economy. I must admit, though, that over the last 2 months, SAITA has been engaged by the Department of Small Business Development. So there's that, because they've realized that legislative issues have been taken by people who've never been informal traders for the informal trading market. So that's a good thing. But I wanted to test with you. Do you really believe that there's hope in this new economy for informal traders?
So 100%, absolutely. I think that the only hope for this for our economy is in that space, and for a number of reasons. So the thing is that we've got a new economy, and then in the new economy, worldwide, small is the new big. If you look at Uber as an example, or Airbnb as another example, their strength is in that it is not a large company. It is a large number of small entities, all aggregated using a technology platform, a payment platform, a marketing platform, and so on. And I think, what you're doing in terms of having an association and stuff lends itself to this kind of concept of how you can aggregate your strength. And that could be, for argument's sake, and these are the kind of things that, I would say was worth considering is, for instance, having a SAITA type, a payment platform that informal traders could utilize, call it like an Uber, so that actually now, instead of having 500,000 tabletop traders and 100,000 spazas and 50,000 gasikos outlets and so on, you would have much more power, because you'd be aggregating onto one platform and potentially use that to negotiate with whether it's banks or suppliers and so on and so forth, and negotiate obviously outside of the corporate sector, but just as a starting point. So currently the problem is that, first of all, the visual that people have of the informal sector is the one I said I don't like, is that it's disorganized, small scale, subsistence, unsophisticated, low technology. And yet we know informal traders know how to, there's no issue with technology, using WhatsApp, using Facebook, using payment systems, whatever it might be. So the starting point is that, aggregating this kind of power is important. I do think that this informal sector needs to adopt things like better technology, better organization. I get asked all the time, is there one body we can approach to talk to spaza shop owners? And is there another body to talk to hawkers or to the muti business? That's another one I didn't mention, the informal muti traders with 18 billion rand a year. But the point is that this sector needs to be better organized, which is certainly where you're going. And on the one hand, on the other hand, it needs to be seen by government and by the rest of the economic parts of our society as something to be considered, as in, like, this is a real economic activity. This is a real thing. These are real business people. And I think from my side, what SAITA should be doing is driving that thing, is that we are business people. We are informal traders, but we are actually business people. The only thing informal about us is that we don't, necessarily, have a formal structure or a formal space that we operate from, but we are business people. And that's a starting point that then suddenly everyone looks at it differently. The other thing about it is that I think there's an underestimation by the same role players outside of how much money this sector turns over, and how many people they employ, and how many people they keep, fed, pay for their school fees, put them through university, like my lady at the schoolyard. There is not an appreciation of that. And when I talk and I show the numbers and do this kind of thing, people say, like, first of all, for the last few years, they kind of say it can't be true. Now I saw, FNB was quoted the other day saying they cannot believe how big the informal sector is, and they were all breathless about it. And I was like, well, they should have read my book in 2014. They could have learned, not in 2020, discover this. So it is definitely, there is no question about it, the next big economic sector. But it needs to believe in itself, which I think is where you guys are going. And also it needs to get a voice that says, this is who we are. And we're not necessarily these, subsistence, survivalist little businesses.
No, absolutely not. I think you've summed it up quite nicely. That's exactly what SAITA is endeavoring to do, to say we are business people and we know our stuff, and that is why you need to talk to us when you make decisions about us.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be that way. And so far, that's been working for us. But I want you to, our time's almost up. So I'd like you to just leave a little message of hope to the informal traders existing, but also to people who've recently lost their formal jobs that are now thinking about this and probably are sitting with exactly that ego fallacy that you spoke about earlier, that being an informal trader is really not cool. So don't you want to just leave us with a message of hope?
Yeah. So before I do that, I sold my business Minanawe recently, and guess what I've done? I've investing in the informal sector. So, wow. I'm putting money where my mouth is. I'm launching a range of products in the muti sector. I'm working with some distribution people. I'm working with some informal traders and so on and so forth, because I believe the opportunities are there, and it's not just about paying lip service to that. It's real. So I think that if you look at this sector, one of the biggest things is I don't believe the average trader recognizes how successful they are. The average informal trader has been in business for 2 to 6 years, according to some work I've done and seen. You know what? Most formal businesses do not survive 2 years. And so actually it's testament to the scale of to the tenacity of the sector. Over lockdown, we've seen, for instance, the municipal markets saying that actually over lockdown and the recent unrest, the informal traders carried on supplying fruit and vegetables to township people when the large corporate businesses like ShopRite, Fruit and Veg City and Co could not do that. That is coming from the markets themselves. I just believe that they need to, every one of them, realize how amazingly successful, how powerful they are, and that when people, whether it's government or municipalities or harassing them or undermining them or not recognizing them, it's really about standing up and saying, I'm incredibly proud of this business. I've put kids to school. I've done this and that. Actually, I'm a business person, and they should appreciate that. And it's the one thing I think is not that many people don't appreciate enough. We say, who is an entrepreneur? And we say Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or whatever. Rubbish. The entrepreneur, the real entrepreneur, is that gogo selling vegetables, that spaza shop owner, whatever it might be. Those are the real entrepreneurs. They started their business in a container, and how did Bill Gates start? In a garage. There's no difference. But in South Africa, those are the real entrepreneurs, and they should be recognized as such. And the mistake we make is that we do not. We say we're looking for another Elon Musk. We're not looking for a Madlamini or so on. And yet those are the entrepreneurs who matter.
They are indeed.
Yeah. And I think, from people who, I think increasingly, with the economy, with lockdown and stuff, those people in the formal trade are either struggling with or have reduced incomes, or starting to look at a hustle on the side. I did some work for one of the banks recently, and we looked at both people who are employed 9 to 5 and people who are hustlers. And the 9 to 5ers said, yeah, you know what? The hustlers, they have much more money than us, and they've got time on their hands. They just don't want a black credit card or something like that. They're happy with their cash in their pocket. And I think there's an increasing realization of this role, and we need to make it sexy to be an informal trader, entrepreneur type person, and and yes, there's hardships. You're out in the sun and whatever, but at the same time, you're a real business person.
GG Alcock, thank you once again. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your inspiration, and best of luck with your new venture. I look forward to hearing more about it. And so yeah, let's keep in touch. But thanks very, very much for your time.
Thank you, and goodbye.
And that was SAITA Straight Talk with author, entrepreneur, and marketer GG Alcock. Look forward to seeing you for our next interesting topic on SAITA Straight Talk.